Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going way back in time to explore ancient Egypt.
A fascinating civilization.
We've got excerpts from Wikipedia's History of Ancient Egypt, and we're going to break it all down.
Excellent.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a really solid understanding of the timeline, the major turning points.
It's a long history.
It really is. So whether you're prepping for a presentation or just, feeding that inner history buff, this is for you.
Absolutely.
We'll uncover some pretty surprising facts along the way.
Oh, I love the surprises.
Like, did you know there was actually a time when Egyptians worshipped a single god?
Really? I didn't know that.
Or that the pyramids weren't built by slaves?
Interesting.
Ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
To really grasp ancient Egypt, we need to start with the Nile River.
Oh, absolutely. The Nile is like the backbone of this whole civilization.
It's like the main character in this whole story, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Imagine this. The Sahara Desert. Not the dry, arid landscape we see today, but this vast grassland.
Oh, wow.
Full of nomadic hunter-gatherers, tons of animals. But as the climate changed over, thousands of years, the grasslands turned into the desert we know today.
Forcing these nomads to settle down.
Exactly. And guess where they went? The Nile. That constant source of water. It was their lifeline.
So it wasn't just a change of scenery. This was a complete lifestyle revolution. Did this move from, chasing gazelles to farming change their social structure, their beliefs?
Such a good question. We see evidence of this shift in early settlements, going all the way back to the 12th millennium BC.
Wow.
Cultivating things like barley and emmer wheat became super important. And that would have required cooperation, organization, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've got these settlements popping up along the Nile, but here's what's really cool. Even before the famous dynasties and pharaohs, Egyptian culture was already starting to take shape. What was going on during this, pre-dynastic period?
Well, during the Naqada Third period, around 3100 to 3000 BC, we see some incredible things happening.
Oh, so
It wasn't just simple pottery and tools. They were making copper tools. And, get this, there's evidence of trade with far-off lands like Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, are you serious? That's mind-blowing. What kind of evidence points to that?
One really cool piece of evidence is this thing called the Gebel el-Arak knife. This knife, found in Egypt, shows a Mesopotamian king. It's incredibly detailed.
Wow. So there was international connection, even back then.
It really suggests that, a cultural exchange that's pretty unexpected for this early period.
Yeah. That's like finding a Roman coin in Viking territory or something. It makes you wonder about the stories behind those exchanges. So I've got this vibrant culture developing along the Nile. But how did it go from separate settlements to a unified kingdom? The one we always think of with ancient Egypt.
Cue the dramatic music.
Here come the pharaohs.
Exactly. This unification of Upper and Lower Egypt is a pivotal moment. It's traditionally credited to King Menes, but more likely it was a king named Narmer. Just imagine bringing these two regions together.
Creating a unified kingdom under one ruler. And thankfully we have the Narmer palette. It actually depicts this unification.
It's an amazing artifact.
A real historical snapshot.
This unification marks the beginning of the early dynastic period. It's when we get this concept of the two lands that became a huge part of Egyptian identity.
So we have a unified Egypt, powerful rulers. What comes next? I think we all know what's coming.
Pyramid time.
The Old Kingdom. It's what everyone pictures when they think of ancient Egypt. Besides the giant tombs, what made this period so important?
The Old Kingdom, it was ruled by the 3rd through 6th dynasties. It was really a time of incredible innovation.
And grandeur.
Of course. Memphis became the royal capital.
And Djoser, he really kicked off the pyramid craze.
Djoser's step pyramid at Saqqara, it was revolutionary.
It was like the prototype for the pyramids that followed.
Exactly. The first of its kind, this grand layered structure. It completely changed architecture. And then, of course, you have the most iconic pyramids of all the ones at Giza.
Built by Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure.
Such amazing structures, still standing today. It's just incredible engineering.
But there's this misconception that they were built by slaves.
Ah, yes. That's not the whole story.
No.
Recent discoveries near Giza actually paint a different picture.
What did they tell us?
It seems these pyramids were actually built by skilled laborers. not slaves.
Oh, wow.
There's evidence they had a city nearby, they were paid for their work, there was even treatment for injuries on site.
So it was a massive coordinated effort.
Exactly. Incredible organization.
So it wasn't brute force, it was brains and craftsmanship.
Precisely.
Amazing how a deep dive can debunk those myths. But no civilization, no matter how impressive, has a smooth ride through history.
Very true.
Even the mightiest empires face challenges.
Absolutely. After the Old Kingdom, Egypt went through periods of instability, internal struggles. We call these the intermediate periods.
The first one started around 2181 BC, a time of major power struggles, social unrest. You mentioned some text called Lamentations that come from this era. What do those tell us about life during this chaotic time?
Oh, the Lamentations are so interesting.
Yeah.
They offer a glimpse into what was happening, a society on the verge of collapse.
Oh, wow.
Social structures falling apart, even possible invasions threatening their way of life.
So it wasn't just political instability, it was a full-blown societal crisis. And I bet all that turmoil made those fancy royal tombs prime targets for looting.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting to see how the following period, the Middle Kingdom, reflects this.
In what way?
Mummies from this era, they start to be covered in protective spells, something we only saw in pharaohs in the Old Kingdom.
Like they were trying to prevent the chaos of the first intermediate period from happening again?
Exactly. This power vacuum led to some interesting power plays.
So who filled the void?
Well, in Lower Egypt, we have the 9th and 10th dynasties. They had their capital in Heracleopolis Magna.
But they weren't the only ones.
You got it. In Upper Egypt, the 11th dynasty, based at Thebes, was gaining power too, setting the stage for a clash of dynasties.
A showdown.
And after years of conflict, in 2055 BC, the Theban forces won. They defeated the Heracleopolitan rulers and reunified Egypt. This victory ushered in the Middle Kingdom.
And this reunification was led by Mentuhotep II, the first pharaoh of the 12th dynasty. What's his story? How did he pull off this reunification?
What's fascinating is that his family line can be traced back to Theban nomarchs, local governors. During the first intermediate period, they took advantage of the power vacuum and asserted their authority.
So he rose from the ashes of that chaotic period and brought Egypt back together. And this marks the beginning of the Middle Kingdom. Was it just a repeat of the Old Kingdom's glory, or did it have its own unique flavor?
The Middle Kingdom, spanning from 2030 to 1650 BC, was a time of stability, prosperity. But it did have a different feel than the Old Kingdom.
How so?
Well, under the 12th dynasty, with their new capital in Ichitoe, thought to be near modern-day Lisht, they really changed things up.
Okay, so what did this new direction look like? What were some of the defining things about the Middle Kingdom?
Well, pharaohs like Senusret III and Senusret III, they weren't just focused on building big pyramids.
Oh.
They were all about consolidating power, expanding into Nubia, strengthening Egypt's borders. They also focused on administrative reforms, making the government more efficient.
So it was less about showing off and more about practicality and stability?
Yeah, exactly.
So is it safe to say that Egypt was back on track after that turbulent first intermediate period?
They were doing well, and under Amenhotep III, we see Egypt reach a new peak of prosperity. But this time, it wasn't just military might.
Really? What else was going on?
Amenhotep III, he was forward-thinking.
Okay.
He saw potential in the Fayum region. He invested in it, boosted agricultural production, and supported large-scale mining operations in the Sinai Peninsula.
He was playing the long game.
Smart move. But, even the best of times can change.
Was there trouble brewing beneath the surface of this prosperity?
There was. You see, toward the end of Amenhotep III's reign, Egypt faced a couple of big challenges.
What kind of challenges?
Well, the population was growing, putting a strain on food resources. And then, to make matters worse, the annual Nile flood, the one they relied on for agriculture.
Yeah.
It started failing.
Oh, that's a recipe for disaster. Did these events send them back into, another downward spiral, back into an intermediate period?
They did. The 13th dynasty, they really struggled to keep things together as central authority weakened. And as often happens in times of, instability, a new power emerges. In the Eastern Nile Delta, a dynasty of West Asian origin, the Hyksos, they started to make their presence known.
The Hyksos. Who were they? How did they gain a foothold in Egypt?
They're a fascinating group, a bit mysterious too. They show up around 1650 BC, and that marks the beginning of the second intermediate period. Now, some sources, they describe a violent takeover, but more recent research suggests a more gradual process, maybe even a migration, driven by things like famine or environmental changes back home.
So less of a dramatic invasion, more of a, hey, can we stay on your couch for a bit kind of thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But of course, it didn't stay that way for long.
Right.
The Egyptian government was weak, plus there were all those internal divisions we talked about.
Right.
It created this opportunity for the Hyksos. They established themselves in the Nile Delta, and eventually they even formed their own dynasty, the 15th dynasty, ruling over parts of Egypt for, get this, over a century.
A century. That's a long time on the couch. So how'd they manage to hold on to power for so long?
Well, they weren't just passive guests,
Right.
The Hyksos, they had their capital at Avaris in the eastern delta. They introduced new technologies, new military strategies to Egypt.
Like what?
The horse-drawn chariot, a total game changer in warfare.
Chariots. That's huge. Imagine them showing up on the battlefield with chariots, like they had tanks and everyone else had swords. But the Egyptians weren't just going to sit back and let this happen, right?
No way. While the Hyksos were ruling in the north, a native Egyptian dynasty emerged down in Thebes, the 17th dynasty, determined to take back their land.
A resistance movement. So how did this clash play out? Slow burn or all-out war?
It was a long and fierce struggle.
Wow.
The 17th dynasty, under leaders like Seqenenretau and Kamose, they fought hard against the Hyksos. And then finally, Ahmose III, the last pharaoh of the 17th dynasty, he did it.
He drove them out.
He expelled the Hyksos, reunified Egypt, and with that victory, he kicked off a new era.
A new era.
The New Kingdom.
A new kingdom. This is where things get really epic, right?
It is. It's considered the golden age of ancient Egypt. Think, grand temples, powerful pharaohs, an empire that stretched way beyond its traditional borders. The 18th to 20th dynasties, they saw Egypt at its absolute peak.
Yeah.
Powerful and influential.
And it all started with Ahmose I, the pharaoh who drove out the Hyksos. What was his deal? Was he just a military guy, or was there more to him?
He was more than just a warrior. He not only drove out the Hyksos, he also reasserted control over Nubar, parts of the Levant.
He was setting the stage for a comeback.
You could see that.
And speaking of comebacks, this is where we meet some of the most famous pharaohs ever, right?
Oh yeah, the New Kingdom is like the all-star team of pharaohs.
It really is. We have Hatshepsut, that incredible female pharaoh who ruled for over 2 decades. And she wasn't content just staying home.
No, she wasn't.
She expanded trade, secured valuable resources.
She was making moves.
She really put Egypt on the international stage. Hatshepsut is such a fascinating figure.
Oh, she really is.
And then there's her successor, Thutmose III. How did he contribute to this golden age?
Thutmose III, sometimes called the Napoleon of Egypt, he was a brilliant military strategist.
A real powerhouse.
He wasn't content with, just maintaining things. He expanded the army, led successful campaigns throughout the Near East. He pushed the boundaries of the empire further than ever before.
He put Egypt on the map as a serious military power. But it wasn't all about conquest, right?
Not at all. Under Amenhotep III, Egypt experienced peace, prosperity. It was a time of incredible architectural achievements.
Like the temple complex at Luxor.
Exactly. It's a testament to their artistry, their architectural genius.
It's truly breathtaking. But then along comes a pharaoh who shook things up. Amenhotep IV later changed his name to Akhenaten.
Oh yeah, Akhenaten.
He's different.
A bit of a rebel.
You could say that. His reign was marked by radical changes. Religiously, culturally.
In what way?
He completely abandoned traditional Egyptian polytheism and introduced a new monotheistic religion centered around the worship of the sun god Aten.
Wait, monotheism in ancient Egypt. That's a huge shift.
It was a big deal, and he was serious about it.
Really? How so? He moved the capital from Thebes to a new city, Amarna. He built it himself. There, he and his wife, Nefertiti, promoted a new art style that broke from the old ways. His religious revolution, it was unlike anything that came before.
A true revolutionary. And then, of course, there's the boy king, Tutankhamun. Why is he so famous, aside from his tomb being discovered intact?
His tomb, found in 1922, is one of the most significant archaeological finds ever. It's like a time capsule full of artifacts that give us incredible insights into Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife, the extravagance of their royal burials. His story, it also reflects the turmoil of Akhenaten's reign and then the restoration of traditional beliefs.
It's like looking directly into the past, but every golden age has to end eventually. What led to the decline of this mighty new kingdom? Internal struggles, external threats, or a combination of both?
It was a bit of everything, really.
Okay.
Maintaining such a vast empire was costly. Plus, there were power struggles, and then you have external threats like those from the Sea Peoples. It all contributed to the downfall.
The Sea Peoples, those mysterious raiders who were causing chaos all over the Mediterranean.
That's them. They were a serious threat to Egypt, other civilizations too. And that's where Ramesses III comes in, the last great pharaoh of the New Kingdom, known for his battles against these Sea Peoples.
So he was trying to hold back the tide, preserve Egypt's power. Did he succeed?
He did.
Wow.
His victories were crucial, but they came at a price. Egypt's resources were depleted by these conflicts, and internal problems like corruption, economic instability, it all started chipping away at the foundations of the New Kingdom.
So they won the battles, but maybe lost the bigger war.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. After Ramesses III died, Egypt went into another period of division, decline, the Third Intermediate Period. It lasted from 1069 to 664 BC. Egypt was divided once again, different power centers vying for control.
Back to square one, with those internal struggles and a fragmented Egypt. It seems to be a recurring theme, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? This time, powerful priests in Thebes gained influence. And Libyan rulers, they emerged in the north. The 21st dynasty, based in Tanis up north, ended up sharing power with the high priests of Amun in Thebes. Fragmented rule, again. But then, things get interesting. Remember the Nubians, south of Egypt.
Yeah, the ones the Egyptians had been expanding into during the Middle Kingdom.
That's them. Well, they saw an opportunity during this Third Intermediate Period. Under their leader, Paye, they launched a campaign that led to the establishment of the 25th dynasty.
Wait, a Nubian dynasty. So the Nubians, who had once been under Egyptian control, ended up conquering them.
It's a real twist, isn't it?
It is.
Paye's conquest, it was a huge moment in Egyptian history. It shows how power can shift, how the dominated can become the dominators. And these Nubian pharaohs, they didn't reject Egyptian culture. They embraced it. They built temples, kept many of the traditions going.
They incorporated it into their own rule, a real blend of cultures. But did it last?
Unfortunately not. Remember the Hyksos? They introduced the chariot and changed the game.
Right.
Well, a new power was on the rise in the Near East, one with even better military technology, the Assyrians. Known for their military strength, their expansionist policies.
I'm sensing another takeover coming. They wanted Egypt.
They did. The Assyrian king, Esarhaddon, he launched a series of campaigns. He ended up capturing Memphis, pushing the Nubians back to their southern stronghold.
So once again, Egypt falls under foreign rule, this time to the Assyrians. Weren't the Assyrians known for being a bit brutal? Did they crush Egyptian culture?
Actually, they didn't directly rule Egypt. They were more interested in control. They put in puppet rulers, local Egyptian kings who were loyal to Assyria. This marks the start of the late period.
The late period. It sounds like the twilight years of ancient Egypt, just bouncing from one foreign ruler to the next.
It was tough time. The late period, it lasted from 664 to 332 BC. There was a succession of dynasties, including the Set dynasty. They actually managed to restore some stability, even brought back a degree of prosperity.
So there was still some fight left in them. Tell me about this Set dynasty. How did they manage to do that in such a chaotic time?
The Set dynasty, they were based in Sais in the Nile Delta. They were really good diplomats, strategists. They managed to get some independence from the Assyrians and even push back against Babylonian incursions. They focused on bringing back traditional Egyptian art, culture.
A bit of a renaissance, a return to their roots.
Yeah, something like that. But their revival, it didn't last. Another power was rising in the Near East, the Persians, led by Cyrus the Great, who already had this massive empire. And Egypt, well, it was right in their path.
Oh no, another takeover. Were the Persians hands-off like the Assyrians, or did they, do things their own way?
The Persians, under King Cambyses II, they conquered Egypt. The Battle of Pelusium in 525 BC, it was a decisive victory for the Persians. It ended the late period and brought in a new era of Persian rule. Cambyses II, Cyrus the Great's son, he became the pharaoh of Egypt, started the 27th dynasty, the first period of Persian rule.
So the Persians, they wanted the whole pharaoh package.
They did. But even though he took the title of pharaoh and took part in Egyptian religious stuff, he also, put policies in place to make sure the Persians were in control. He was making a statement.
So after centuries of pharaohs, Egypt became just another part of the Persian Empire, a satrapy. That must have been tough.
It was a big shift. But even under foreign rule, the spirit of ancient Egypt, it didn't go away. Their culture, their beliefs, their desire for independence, it all persisted. They even rebelled a few times. briefly restored native rule.
Always pushing back against those in control.
That's right. Unfortunately, the Persians came back. They reconquered Egypt under Artaxerxes III. That was the second and final period of Persian domination. It's pretty amazing how after all these challenges, the spirit of ancient Egypt remained strong.
Resilient. But didn't you mention Alexander the Great earlier? Didn't he conquer Egypt too?
He did. And that's a major turning point. But we're out of time for this part of the deep dive. Join us next time as we explore Alexander's legacy, the rise of the Ptolemies, and the final chapter in the story of ancient Egypt.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time, we traveled through thousands of years of ancient Egyptian history, from those early settlements along the Nile all the way to the rise and fall of empires. We even saw the Nubians conquering their former overlords. What a story. But as we left off, there was a new player about to enter the scene. Alexander the Great. You know, the Macedonian king who was building his own massive empire. What happened when he turned his attention to Egypt?
Oh, Alexander's arrival in Egypt back in 332 BC, that was a real turning point. The Persians, they were dealing with their own problems at the time.
Internal struggles.
Exactly. They weren't in any position to resist Alexander's armies. They were powerful.
It's amazing how history can change because of these larger-than-life figures. Alexander was definitely one of them. But was his conquest of Egypt just another brutal takeover? Or was it different?
It was more than just brute force.
Yeah.
Alexander, he was a smart guy.
Yeah.
He knew how to play the game politically. He embraced Egyptian traditions, went to Memphis, took part in religious rituals, even consulted the oracle of Amun at the Siwa Oasis.
And the oracle, she declared him the son of Amun, right?
She did it.
What a move. Did the Egyptians buy it?
It seems like they did. By respecting their customs, their beliefs, Alexander, he made his rule seem legitimate.
He wasn't just a conqueror. He was like divinely appointed.
Exactly.
So he was smart, combined military power with religious authority. But he also brought Greek culture and ideas with him, right? He founded Alexandria, which became this huge center of learning and culture in the Hellenistic world.
Alexandria was a marvel.
It was.
Incredible urban planning, architecture. It quickly became this cosmopolitan hub, attracted scholars, merchants, artists, you name it, from all over the Mediterranean. Alexander's vision for the city, it really reflected this fusion of Greek and Egyptian cultures that we see in the Hellenistic period.
He was building new centers of culture and learning. But empires, no matter how great, they don't last forever. What happened to Alexander's empire after he died?
You're right, they don't. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, his empire, it was divided up among his generals.
Oh, I bet that caused some problems.
It did. It led to the Wars of the Diadochi, a period of conflict, power struggles, all these generals fighting for control.
And Egypt got caught in the middle.
Right in the middle. During this chaotic time, one of Alexander's generals, Ptolemy Antipater, he took control of Egypt, established a new dynasty that lasted almost 300 years.
The Ptolemaic dynasty, so another foreign dynasty ruling Egypt. But you said earlier that the Ptolemies, even though they were Macedonian Greek, they adopted a lot of Egyptian customs. What was their thinking? Were they trying to keep the Egyptians happy, or was it something more?
It was a mix of things. They presented themselves as pharaohs, took part in religious ceremonies, even built temples to Egyptian gods. They weren't trying to get rid of Egyptian culture. They incorporated it.
Smart move. Respect the local traditions and beliefs. Did it work? Did they avoid those rebellions we saw under the Persians?
It seemed to work. The Ptolemaic period, it was pretty peaceful. Prosperous, too. Alexandria, it really thrived. A center of trade, scholarship, and culture. The Ptolemies, they were big on building projects. Like the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
A Lighthouse of Alexandria. I can only imagine what that must have been like to see. But when we talk about the Ptolemies, there's one name that stands out. Cleopatra VII. Why is her story so fascinating, even all these years later?
Cleopatra, she's legendary. Her story, it's got political intrigue, ambition, and, tragedy. She was brilliant, a great strategist, and a skilled diplomat.
I can see that.
She navigated Roman politics, made alliances with powerful people like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony.
Cleopatra is often portrayed as this, seductive, alluring figure, but it sounds like there was a lot more to her than that.
Definitely. Cleopatra was the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt. She fought hard to keep Egypt independent, but she got caught up in Rome's ambitions. Her death in 30 BC, after Mark Antony's defeat by Octavian, the future Roman Emperor Augustus, that was the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and Egypt became part of the Roman Empire.
So after thousands of years of pharaohs, pyramids, this incredible civilization, it all became a Roman province, the end of an era.
It is a bittersweet ending to an amazing story. But the legacy of ancient Egypt, it's still with us today. Their art, architecture, beliefs, innovations, they continue to inspire us.
It really is incredible to think that a civilization that started along the Nile thousands of years ago still has such a hold on us.
It leaves us with so many questions, like how did they build those incredible structures with the technology they had? Or how did they develop such a complex system of writing? Mathematics. What else is out there waiting to be discovered?
Those are questions for another deep dive. For now, our journey through ancient Egypt has come to an end. We've seen dynasties rise and fall, empires clash, and the lasting impact of this amazing civilization. It reminds us that even the greatest empires eventually crumble. But their influence on the world, it can last for centuries.
That's for sure.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into ancient Egypt. We hope you learned something new, gained a deeper appreciation for this incredible civilization, and maybe, just maybe, we've sparked a little curiosity in you to keep exploring.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of knowledge.